Now so I'm glad I was able to give you guys a little bit of a rest while we heard from our local candidates, but we'll go ahead and start with Mark Meuser and hear from our state candidate. Everybody, welcome Mark Meuser.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming out. I believe this is a Friday, last time I checked. I've been on the bike for about the last 32 days. It is a Thursday. Okay, thanks for coming out on a Thursday night. Thank you very much. This is actually our fourth event today, fourth county. And I want to answer the question that the Sacramento Bee asked me 4 weeks ago when we started this bike tour. Are you crazy? And the answer to that question is, I am a Republican. I am running in the state of California. Is the month of July, the month of August, and you as the media aren't going to cover my campaign. And if I want to win, I need to have name recognition. And if you want name recognition, you got to have the media talking about you. And so I'm spending 46 days going to all 58 counties in the state of California on my bike. And I've already had 3 media interviews today alone. The media is talking, which is building name recognition. So that way when we get into September and October, you know, people need to hear your name multiple times. We've already started building that foundation that can lead to a successful campaign in November. So how did you come up with a 58 county, 46-day tour of the state of California? And the answer to that question is actually very simple. I love history. I have over 200 books that are over 100 years old, written about American statesmen and politicians from the 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. And I love reading how they used to campaign in this country, how they went from county courthouse to county courthouse to county courthouse, and they would get up on the steps and they would present their cause to the people. And if you were running statewide, and you did not visit every single county courthouse, the odds of you winning were very low. It was expected that if you were running statewide, that you went to every county. So about a year ago, when I got recruited to run for California Secretary of State, I knew I owed a duty to all 58 counties to make my case as to why I should be the next California Secretary of State. Now, I started campaigning in October of 2017. And today, I can now announce that I have had a campaign stop in every single county in the state of California. The bike tour is not done, but I have now had a campaign event in every single county. I believe it's important to the 58 counties who will be voting for me that I come and make my case to them. And so as I was looking at the map of the state of California and what it would take to do a statewide tour where you visited all 58 counties, and where the cities were, and where you were going to have to drive to. And we started looking at the distances and knowing how many events that you could even do in a day. It became clear that if I didn't want to gain weight, I needed to find a way to lose weight on a campaign trail. And so those bikes, I used to race bikes 20 years ago. I did an Ironman almost 3 years ago. I like to ride a bike. And it's like, let's do something a little bit different. Just visiting the 58 counties was not going to get media attention. And if you want to get your message out, you got to have a way that the media is going to talk about your race. And so adding a modern twist to the old whistle-stop tour was our way of making sure our message is heard. Now, what is my message? Well, let's start with this. I'm running for Secretary of State, which is the Chief Election Officer of the state of California. That means I'm responsible for the fair and honest elections across the entire state of California. Before I can tell you what I want to do, I first need to tell you what the problem is in the state of California. According to the Pew Research Center, a liberal think tank, they have measured the elections in the United States of America across 14 different measurables. And they have scientifically determined that the state of California has the number 2 ranked elections in the United States of America. And that's not number 2 from the top. That's number 2 from the bottom. We have the second worst elections, scientifically proven, in the United States of America. Now, some people might say, that's not good, but at least we're in the United States of America. We have taught the world how to vote. Well, Harvard did a study of every country in the world. And they have pulled out the 28 Western countries. They call them Western democracies. And of the 28 Western democracies, when it comes to election integrity, the United States of America is ranked 28th. We have the worst elections in the Western world. And California has the second worst elections in the United States of America. That is a problem. Somebody just mentioned 14 votes. When I was in my 20s, I helped a man in Idaho beat an incumbent by 19 votes. That guy is now the majority leader in the state of Idaho legislature, and he won by 19 votes. Your vote does matter. But when you have a country where there is no election integrity, people do not think that their vote matters. And they are not willing to go out of their way to participate in an election system that they feel is rigged. So it's up to the Secretary of State to make sure that you enforce the rules of law so that you have fair and honest elections. So the Secretary of State, there are 4 aspects of elections in the state of California that the Secretary of State is over. The first is voter registration, the foundation of every election. The second is election day procedure. The third is counting the vote. And the fourth is auditing that vote to make sure nothing happened during the counting of the vote. Voter registration. There are 11 counties in the state of California with over 100% voter registration. That means there are more people on the voter rolls than are eligible to vote. Now, leading the way in civic participation with 144% voter registration, Los Angeles County. Coming in second, 138% voter registration, San Diego County. How do you do that? Did you know that there are over 10,000 people living in the state of California who are registered to vote that are older than the oldest person living in the world? And 4,000 of them voted in 2016. You think you got a problem? Voter registration. As Secretary of State, it is my job to maintain the statewide voter database and to remove from the voter rolls those people who are not eligible to vote. What can I do about it? Well, number one, this year there was a Supreme Court case on cleaning up voter rolls. and the state of California filed a brief in which they said, Supreme Court of the United States, here are 11 different government databases that a Secretary of State is allowed to use to clean up the voter rolls. The state of California is only using 3 of those 11 government databases that they told the Supreme Court you are allowed to use. It means they know what they need to do. They are simply not doing the job. How bad is it? A couple years ago, CBS down in Los Angeles ran a study, and they found that there were several hundred people who have been dead over 20 years who had voted at least 10 times. There is a database called the Social Security Death Records that the Secretary of State is entitled to use, but the current Secretary of State is refusing to use the Social Security Death Records to clean up the voter rolls. We all expect our government to communicate with each other. And you know what? When the Register of Voters sends to the jury service poll your data so you can receive a jury service notice, and then the jury service sends out notices to we the people, and 20% of those come back to the jury service as undeliverable as addressed. The person has passed away, person has moved out of the state, or the person has presented evidence that they're not a citizen of the United States of America. You would think that the jury service poll should send that information over to the Register of Voters so that they can clean up the voter databases. But here in the state of California, that is not happening. The data is only going from the Register of Voters to the jury service poll, but it's not coming back so that we can have clean and accurate voter rolls. Why is that a problem? The other day I was talking to a young lady. She lived up in Gold Country. She went to the polls to vote. And as she filled in her name to vote, she noticed that her father-in-law had already voted. She became very upset. Because if her father-in-law came all the way down from heaven to vote, he should have at least stopped by for dinner. He had been dead for 5 years. And somebody came in, because we do not require voter ID in the state of California, and somebody came in and cast an illegal vote. That's a problem. It's a problem with the integrity of our elections. And if we want to restore the integrity of our elections, we need to make sure that we have clean voter rolls so that only those people who are eligible to vote are able to vote. Let's move to point number 2, Election Day. How many people here heard the news story? 118,000 people were removed from the voter rolls in Los Angeles County. People showed up to the polls to vote on Election Day and were not on the voter rolls. What are you supposed to do in that situation? And the thing is that many people were turned away, given false information because the poll workers had not been properly educated on election law and election procedures. I watched it happen in my own poll in Contra Costa County on Election Day, where a man came in and he wasn't on their list, and I listened as the poll worker gave faulty information to the man. Our poll workers are the face of our elections. Most people will not meet the Secretary of State or your county Register of Voters. And it's critical that those people who are our face of our elections are properly trained in election law and election day procedure. And that's one thing that I can do as Secretary of State, is I can make sure that we give them the training that they need in order to do the job, so that no voter in the state of California goes away thinking his vote does not count. Now, I'm sure everybody in here has heard about foreign influence in our elections and hacking voting machines. Is it something that we need to be concerned about? Yes. Even though a couple weeks ago there was a hearing in Congress and a Secretary of State got up and said that there is no evidence that a single vote was hacked in the 2016 election by Russia. The thing is, we know it's a problem. Why? Because the leading vote counting machine manufacturer admitted to Congress last month that they have created a backdoor Wi-Fi accessible link so that they can hack their voting machines. They admit that it's there. It's a problem. We have to deal with it. I was one of the first attorneys that they flew into Wisconsin in 2016 and Michigan for the presidential recounts. Why did we have a presidential recount? Because there were so many people who thought that the election had been hacked in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania that Jill Stein raised millions of dollars so that way there was a recount. And I was one of the first attorneys. I was in 6 counties in 8 days in 2 different states. And I watched the recounting, the manual recounting of thousands upon hundreds of thousands of ballots. And you know what? We were able to prove that there was no hacking of that election. But because of the scrutiny that we put on those 2 states, we found so many other problems that the Michigan legislature was forced to take it up immediately when they came back into session and correct major problems. Same thing happened after Bush v. Gore in 2000 because the media came in to Florida and looked at every single ballot, and they came up with a comprehensive report, and the state of Florida was able to pass some laws to fix the problem. These are outside influences that were auditing these elections. But in the state of California, when an outside group like Election Integrity Project of California, or maybe the Bernie Sanders people down in San Diego, when they want to try to audit our elections, the Secretary of State shoves them away and does not allow them to look. We live in a republic where we, the people, select our elected officials. Means we are the government, not the person sitting in the office. We're the government. And it is important that we, the people, when we see that there might be a problem with our elections, that we be allowed to audit it. Yet the state of California is preventing these outside groups from looking at what's behind the curtain. It's critical that if we want honest elections, if we want to restore integrity in our elections, if we want to restore our voice in California, we got to put somebody in the Secretary of State who believes that because of the hacking of the elections, we need more audits done by the county. The Secretary of State needs to do more independent audits. And we need to open up the books to these outside groups, as long as they were willing to pay the cost, to be able to audit these elections. So that is what I'm running on. That is what I'm running to do because I believe elections matter. And it is important that we restore the integrity of our elections here in California because, as I said, we live in a republic. And in a republic, we, the people, select our representatives through the vote. And that is why I am running for Secretary of State. That is why I'm taking the time to go and visit every single county in the state of California to make the case that it is time that we elect someone to the Secretary of State who's not going to treat it as a stepping stone to some higher office, who's not going to spend all of his time campaigning for U.S. Senate. Instead, it's time to elect somebody who actually understands elections. As an election law attorney, I've been told I'm probably one of the first, if not the first, California Secretary of State candidate who's actually made a living in elections before running for Secretary of State. Now, here's the deal. 4 years ago, Pete Peterson ran for Secretary of State, and Pete Peterson almost won the Secretary of State. People said that he probably would have won, but for the margin of fraud in Los Angeles County. That's how close the race was. He was outspent 7-1. Now, we're keeping this race a whole lot closer. We're about 3-1 right now. But let's look at the path to success for a Republican running in the state of California. 45% of California Democrats do not like the direction the state is going. 45% of California Democrats do not like the way the state is going. That is called a political tide change. Let me give you another statistic. In 2016, the California Chamber of Commerce did a survey of the state, and they said, if the election for governor were held today, who would you vote for, a Republican or a Democrat? And the Democrat won by 11, almost 12 points. In 2017, they did the exact same survey, and it was 3 points. That's within the margin of error. That's within the margin of a well-run grassroots campaign. That's within the margin of a well-funded media campaign. This race, statewide, there's been a political tide change going on. But in order to win, we have to get our message out. We have to build our name recognition. Now, as a Republican, I have a secret weapon in 2018. It's called the repeal of the gas tax. Now, to give you an idea how unpopular that is, let's go look at Senate District 29. What's Senate District 29? It's in LA County, Orange County, and San Bernardino. The senator's name was Josh Newman, and he was a tie-breaking vote on the repeal of the gas tax. And Carl DeMille got out there and he did a signature petition to recall Josh Newman. And on election day, in June of this year, he was recalled. Now, what's so significant about that? 2 years ago, that Senate district, the combined Democrat vote in the June primary was 56 points. In the June primary of 2018, the combined Democrat vote was only 40 points. That is a 16-point swing. If we have a 16-point swing in my race, game, set, match, I win in a landslide. Okay? That is huge because there are a lot of lazy Republicans who only vote in presidential election years who are going to be coming out and voting because of the repeal of the gas tax. And the Democrats don't have that same edge because it's not motivating their base. It motivates the Republican base. And because we know that there's a lot of disenfranchised Democrats right now, and I'm running for a position that already is pretty neutral, I'm riding my bike around the state to make sure our message is heard, that we're building the name recognition. And as we do that, we see an avenue for success. About a week ago, I was at an event, and Congressman Steve Knight got up. I had met him once. And in his introduction to me, he said, we're in Washington, D.C., are watching this race for Secretary of State because we think that this is going to be the race that we are able to break back into owning a constitutional office in the state of California. Now, personally, I think with the repeal of the gas tax, we're going to get more than just a Secretary of State. But we are doing everything we can, including riding over 4,000 miles on a bike to make sure that we have the name recognition, to bring on the people on our team, to make sure we get our message out. Today I sent out an email, and I started to list all the people on my team who are helping get this done. I actually ended up deleting the paragraph. There's just so many people on our team, from media to event planners to fundraisers, just everyone who's working so hard to make sure that we can get across the finish line this time. Pete Peterson ran a great race, and he almost did it. Now is our opportunity to take back our state. Because there are many people, I've heard this probably 100 times, the most important race in the United States of America in 2018 is the California Secretary of State's race. Because as California goes, so goes the nation. And until we restore integrity in our elections in California, the special interest is going to control who gets elected, not we the people. Until California can take back our Secretary of State, we're not going to be able to take back California, let alone stop the crazies in the United States of America. So my associates are going to come around. They're going to give each and every one of you a contribution envelope. And if you are in a position today where you can make a contribution, make sure you give it back to them, and they will give you a pen, a Mark Meuser pen. We're almost out of them, but I think we got a couple more stops where you're going to be able to get one of our Mark Meuser pens. So if you can make a contribution today, we do appreciate getting it back. At this point in time, I'm going to bring up my friend Rody, who's running for state controller. After he speaks, we'll both come up and we'll answer all your questions at that point in time. But my name is Mark Meuser. I'm running to be your next Secretary of State. And with Meuser, you are more sure of fair and honest elections. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Rody, who's running for California State Controller. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Well, my name isn't Rody, but that's his nickname for me because my real name is Konstantinos Roditis, and it's really annoying to say that all the time, especially as we're riding bikes. So he's like, Rody, Rody, Rody. So on the ballot, if you go, where's this Rody guy? It's Konstantinos Roditis. But thank you for having me. A lot of you guys might not know what a controller is or who the controller is or what the controller's office does. There seems to be like two money people in the state. On the constitutional offices, it's the treasurer and the controller. So to give you guys a little perspective or kind of know the differences on a layman's kind of term, the way you want to think about it is for the treasurer, when tax dollars go to the state coffers, into the state treasury, that's the treasurer. They go ahead and handle and monitor that, and also they work with bonds, and that's kind of a simplified version, obviously. And the controller is the person, the chief financial officer for the state, and when the money comes out, they sign the checks. So because the controller is the person who signs the checks, does the payrolls, issues out payments for government programs, money that's coming from the state government and comes down here to Sutter County or to your cities, right? As the money travels down, those usually will come through the controller's office. So because the controller has an eye on the money and is responsible that payments are issued correctly, right, that comply with the law, the controller has this unique ability to audit. But not just audit, but independently audit, which is really important, right? So in the legislature, if they want to audit a program, for instance, like the high-speed rail, it needs to go into a committee. And they have to vote for it, and there's a lot of political wheeling and dealing and everything else that goes along with it. But as controller, which our current controller has refused to audit, but as controller, you have the ability to audit the program. Now, as many of you guys would probably say, like, oh, why would we need to audit the high-speed rail? It's been run so perfectly well, right? I mean, when we went ahead and got the high-speed rail, you guys remember what was promised? It was fantastic. I mean, I totally voted no on it because I know it was a total scam. But they sold it really well, didn't they? It was great. There was going to be 800 miles worth of track. Now they're like, well, we're running kind of behind schedule. It's supposed to be done by 2020, 2033 maybe now. Let's just drop it to 520 miles and try and make it a little bit cheaper. Because, you know, we're all about saving money here up in Sacramento. And they're like, well, you know, we know it's a high-speed rail and it should be going fast, but this 220 miles an hour seems kind of fast. You know, we need to drop it down, you know, make large stretches of the track 110 miles an hour because that's more reasonable of a speed. And we can cut down cost and money on that. And instead of going, you know, a couple of hours, it'd be, 4 hours. So you might actually be faster to drive your own car than take this train once it's built. And we're going to do this as a cost savings measure. And this was, this was all great. It sounded wonderful. And guess what? You're not even going to pay for most of it. It was fantastic, right? You only had to fit the bill for 1/3 of the high-speed rail, my friends. Did you guys know that? You're only supposed to be paying 1/3 of it? That's right. The 1/3 was supposed to be paid from the state, 1/3 from the federal government, and 1/3 from private investors. But you know what's about, as a CEO and CFO, yeah, I wouldn't put a dime into it. And every single CEO and CFO around the world didn't put 1 penny into this project. And the federal government, thank goodness, got wise, and they stopped funding this boondoggle. So from the get-go, this project has not complied with Prop 1A. Now, Prop 1A is the authorizing agent. That was the bill that stated it was going to be about $35 billion. We're going to take out a bond for 9.95, and we're going to have the breakdown of the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Well, now they're saying, yeah, we're kind of a little off. 10 billion for you guys. How about a near 100 billion? That's what it's looking to produce. $98.1 billion is a new projected cost that it could go up to, and I still think that's kind of low. But when I look at this project, and we have a controller who has refused to audit this project, to me it speaks of not even just pure incompetence, but dereliction of duty. And your duty is to protect the taxpayer. And so when I become controller, not I'll take a look and see if there is corruption going on, but I'm going to try and expose it and see within an audit. But I'm also going to defund it on day one, because as a controller, I have the authority to hold payments on anything that doesn't comply with state law. And because the funding parameters of Prop 1A are clear, on day one, I'll go ahead and defund it, and then we can get rid of this thing once and for all. So, thank you. But besides the lovely aspects of being able to hold payments and to do independent audits, the controller has this really great thing, right? Just like this microphone has the loud voice of the controller's office has the bully pulpit. Because I can go ahead and I can start examining books and start exposing the waste, fraud, and abuse that is prevalent in pretty much every single sector and section of government in Sacramento. We just have to take a look at SB 1, the most un-American bill. And that's kind of, surprisingly to say in Sacramento, because what they passed there is many times unbelievable. But it's, in my opinion, one of the most un-American bills that has ever passed here in California. Because, we live in a country and in a state where we're supposed to have representation, right? So if we want to raise taxes, shouldn't you come to the people and say to them, look, this is the money that you guys have paid over the years. We have been diligent in our use of the money, but because it's on a fixed rate, it's been 25 years, maybe we need to increase it just a tad bit to help build our roads and our infrastructure, right? You need to prove to the voter that you have been responsible with their money and you've done everything to make each dollar stretch it to its maximum, efficiently and effectively. But what have we seen? Well, only 10% of all work done by Caltrans is outsourced. Most states do about 50%. Some states do about 80%, like Arizona and Florida. What's the result of this? Well, we spend huge amounts and vast amounts of money to fix our roads. Comparatively to Texas, they spend $1, we spend $4. Other stuff like Arizona is like around $4.75 or $4.70. They spend $1 and then we'll spend the $4.75 up to. That to me is not fiscal conservative. That is not treating the taxpayers with respect and their hard-earned money. And above that, from all the tax dollars that they're taking, they only used, before the tax increase, 20% of the tax gas revenue towards road repairs. So the amount of money that we are using, We steal most of it. We don't use it towards the roads. And when we do, it's highly overpriced. And then you say, well, at least we have all these employees, right? Because we're using the 10%. We only outsource. We still have thousands of employees from our own records that we don't need. Even if we're maximizing and doing all the jobs we can, we still have thousands of employees that cost of analysts between $500 million to $1 billion a year in excess taxpayer money. Now, most of them the study showed that 54% were near or at retirement. So we don't have to fire anybody. We just let them retire. We put a hiring freeze on there. And then we can save hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's what a controller should be doing. It should be putting the emphasis on how we can protect taxpayers and restructure government to protect the taxpayer. But that's not what the controller is doing. And that's why I tell everybody, you have to vote yes on 6. Because what they've said with SB 1 is, we don't need to represent you guys anymore. We don't need to justify any tax increase from now on, because we built into it this beautiful little thing called Consumer Price Index. And when we use that, every single year, your taxes will go up. A lot of you guys didn't know that, might have not known that with SB 1. Every single year, the gas tax will go up without a vote, without a committee. It will just automatically go up. They don't have to justify to you, the voter, that they spent their money wisely. I mean, we live in America. We need to have representation up there. And the stuff that they're doing up in Sacramento is unbelievable. So that's why we need to get together and rally around yes on 6 and get people from city council, from controller, secretary of state. We need to get the right people in office. And as controller, that's what I'm going to be doing as well. I'm going to be working hard, not just on these programs and policies, but trying to build a farm team coming up that we don't have to deal with this year after year after year after year. We need to be united and we need to work hard. And one of the things that I'm going to be working on as controller in 2020, I'm planning on putting a nice new tax plan that's coming out, right? Because I want to restructure the way we do government. I want to do it the way we used to do it, where it's more authority is given to the counties and to the cities. California used to be that way. Most governing regulations and tax used to be on the county level. That's how we used to do government. But they have a different approach in Sacramento. The current controller, now if you guys got mad with SB 1, I got something new to tell you that you're going to be really, really mad with me for telling you. But her emphasis for her second term is a comprehensive tax reform. That's what her plan is called, comprehensive tax reform in California, a contextual framework. Sounds really official. Sounds really good. You know what the framework is? Raising your taxes. Surprise, that's her number one issue that she says she's going to focus on, is raising your taxes. And what in that framework is called the service and labor tax. So if you guys have never heard of the service and labor tax, well, I'm going to tell you, and you're going to get really, really, really mad. But I hope you take that anger and you go vote for me and you vote for Mark. But the service and labor tax. So for instance, right now you take your car into a repair shop. What do they only charge you tax on? They charge you tax on the parts, not on the labor. What they want to do is tax the labor, just like they do the parts on a sales tax. So you can quickly see how everything becomes more and more expensive. And it's not for small items, or, I mean, car repairs are not cheap. You know, but people want to say, well, maybe just for a haircut, that might make sense. It's only a couple bucks, or a movie theater. Not, you know, we're not looking at taxing something expensive like health care, because that's what they're looking at. So you think medicine's expensive now, going to see your doctor? Well, they want to tax your health care. How many working parents out there, or single mothers? Well, they want to tax child care. You name it, they want to tax it. And their estimates that came up, remember SB 1 was approximately $5.4 billion per year, folks. Remember that number, because the service and labor tax that they're proposing is $120 billion at least a year in new taxes. This is scary, and it will come about if we do not do anything and restructure the way we do things in California. Because here's the fundamental truth of what's happening in California and the United States. When the Republicans passed the tax plan, which is commonly known as the Trump tax plan, Right? It had some good aspects and some bad aspects. It had bad aspects for governments like California that have really high taxes and have a lot of millionaires and billionaires in it. Now, if you're working folks and you make a good living, it was great. You could get more money into your pocket. Right? You saved money. The Republican tax plan was good for the vast majority of people, except for millionaires and billionaires, because previously you had 100% state and local tax deduction. Now you only have $10,000. So when you're a billionaire or you're a millionaire and you're paying 13.3% top marginal tax rate in California, and the top marginal tax rate for capital gains is 23.8%, you're not paying both. You're paying California. Whatever you pay to there, you get to deduct it from what you pay for the federal government, and so you didn't have to pay that. So it didn't really matter, right? If I have to pay $100 total in taxes and I got to pay somebody $75 and the other person $25, then you tell me, no, flip it around. You got to pay him $25 and the other person $75. At the end of the day, do you care? No, you're paying $100 in taxes, and that's how it was viewed for them. So the high taxes and the high regulations really made it difficult for the middle class because it ruined purchasing power and created the cost of living to go higher. Now, for the really rich, it's negligible to them. They want to live in California. Well, now their tax bill is coming, and they're like, you mean I got to pay another $1 million, $5 million, $50 million a year? Well, you know, Florida's pretty nice this time of year, and I can live there and buy a house there for 6 months and 1 day out of the year, and I can pay absolutely zero in state income tax. And why is this a huge problem? Well, if you look at the general fund for California, 70,000 people make up 48% of the general budget. 15,000 people make 25%. That's why you see when the stock market goes up, like we've had the last 10 years and it's been doing pretty well, they go, Jerry Brown's that fiscal conservative. He even gave us a surplus. Even though he raised the budget by 60% over the last 8 years and we have a $9 billion, is because billionaires have been paying high capital gains tax. What happens when the stock market goes down or they start to leave? Bam, you start seeing the budget go down, and it's going to permanently stay down. So their solution is, if they're leaving, we have two solutions. One, cut taxes, cut regulation, and make California actually business friendly and affordable to live in, and we have to compete with other states like Nevada and Texas and Arizona and Idaho. Or we can just continue to keep those tax rates in our policies and just implement a service tax. And that's their solution. And so if we don't do anything about it, this is what we're going to get. And that's why I'm running for controller, is to emphasize and tell people this is what's going on in our state. This is the financial matter. And as you guys were talking about some of the pension issues, it's worse than they're even telling you, right? Some of the stuff that they did on unfunded liability, they said they've removed the amortization rate from 30 years to 20 years to cut down that unfunded, but it's putting more pressure on cities, on local cities. And what does that have to do with them? Well, they're limited on sales tax and property tax. And what's that going to happen to them? Well, we need to pay these pensions. What are we going to do? Well, maybe we'll take that. We'll keep our mouth shut for that service tax. We'll take it because we need to pay for our pensions. And we're lying about the rate of return from CalPERS. We're saying 7.5%, even though we're not even anywhere near there, right? And that's why they said we're only a couple $100 billion, which, you know, I love how they pretend like it's no big deal. But even their own consultants say the rate should be 6.2% rate of return. And they're like, no, we're going to keep the high one because we don't want it to balloon. Or Stanford University, who did a study, and they're like, really, the rate of return from now on is probably going to be at 5.5%. And if you calculated that, we're at $900 billion just on CalPERS, unfunded liability. The problems are deep, and they're trying to hide it by playing numbers games and kicking the can down the road and trying to keep the service tax a secret. But that's what they're planning on doing. So we need to fundamentally restructure how we do business in California, and if we don't, we're just going to go down the tubes. And that's why when I'm elected as controller, I'm going to put a committee together with people from your county board of supervisors, city councils, and groups to fundamentally structure differently how we do business in California. I'm going to move most regulatory and taxing authority on the county and onto the city level. So there'll be zero state income tax, zero sales tax, nothing from the state. It's going to prevent direct taxation from the state to you. We're going to fundamentally change it. I call my plan trickle-up taxation. So this is how it works. Instead of money, currently you pay it, your taxes go up to Sacramento, and then they trickle back down through waste and government bureaucracy all the way down to your county and to your city with a bunch of strings attached. So you gentlemen will know when you guys get in there, it's going to be lovely. They're going to say, here's your money that we took from your own community, and you have to spend it this way and with these strings attached, and you better do what we say or you won't get a penny. And that's how they operate. So I say, I really don't like being told what to do, especially with my own money in my own community. So why not have our county board of supervisors determine what our income tax rate will be? Maybe you guys want 0. Maybe you guys want 5% as the top marginal tax rate. Well, if you want to change your sales tax, have it a little bit differently. It'll give you the power and authority to keep money within your own communities, and then we limit the state government, just like we normally used to in this country, limit the federal government to the 18 enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. We federalize basically California to the county levels, limit the state to only things that the state can do, and then from there, we give them a percentage. We trickle up. We give them a percentage of the tax dollars generated on the local level to the state and say, you're limited to these enumerated powers on the state level. We expect you to do this. After that, leave us the hell alone. And that's what I want to go ahead and turn California into, basically back the way we used to do. Like I said earlier, most taxes and regulatory authority were done on the county level. And I want to reverse and go back to that because we have fundamentally have forgotten as constitutionalists, as federalists, that government is best when it is local. And if we're only fighting for myself or other statewide offices to gain that power, then we're wasting our time. I tell people the same seat that Jerry Brown sits in is the same one that Ronald Reagan sits in. You can do some good and you can do some bad. Isn't our objective and goal not just to get the person there, but get the right people in there to decentralize and devolve the power back to the local communities where the next controller, the next governor, we're less worried about what they can do because we've stripped enough power away from those offices and given it back to the people. So, again, my name is Konstantinos Roditis. I'm running for California State Controller. You can visit me at cacontroller.com. And me and Mark are going to go ahead and take some questions. And as Mark usually does, he MCs the questions part. And you can ask questions for either one of us.
Go ahead.
I want to ask Konstantino, what about the Council of Governments that we have operating everywhere? These can be abolished with this tax plan that you're talking about.
Well, we're going to work with, so, number one thing is, okay, hold on.
With your tax plan, I love that tax plan, but these council of governments that we have and these COGs all over California, they have control of the finances and are able to control the counties in a way. That's the way I understand it. These can be abolished, or how are you going to deal with that?
There's going to be a lot of restructuring, and that's why once I get elected, we're going to put a committee and everything else together because I need to fundamentally know what's best handled by the county, what's best handled by the city, and what's best handled by the state. And then, but primarily, the best seat of government will be the county. They'll have primary authority in the restructuring. And so most of the money will stick within there because I don't like the whole strings attached, yes. Right? So I understand when there is block grants or of categorical grants that come from the state or from the federal government, that those things, as they come further down, there's going to be some strings attached. I want to limit that as much as possible because the unique, within even a conservative area, right? Within one county will be completely different than another one. As I just tell people, I'm like, even in San Francisco, you know, it's a progressive area, but San Francisco is completely different than Los Angeles. And it doesn't make sense to have 120 people dictating everything, a policy for the entire state. And it doesn't meet the needs of even those progressive areas, let alone the conservative areas. So my goal is to do a full study onto it, figure out which is the best way to do things by bringing a lot of experts and having a committee together. And then once we have the plan and then the implementation, right, because it can't happen immediately, because we're going to get rid of some a lot of state bureaucracies. We're going to get rid of a lot of those and then transfer it over to the counties or to the city government. And that's human capital too, so we're going to have to put some restraints on hiring freezes to, waiting until, people retire and then slowly transferring and moving. So there's going to have to be implementation. It can't happen immediately as we transition from the one structure to the other one. So that's the whole study will take some time. Well, I plan on doing it in about a year or so, but the implementation can't happen obviously immediately. I wish I could, but there's political realities that are going to take place.
Go ahead.
Hello. Just checking.
Okay. And right behind you, lady.
Konstantino, can you give us a little bit on your background currently and what your position that you hold in the private world?
Sure. Well, besides that, the CFO, the controller is the chief financial officer, and I am a CEO and CFO. The number one principle that I tell to people is, besides that I'm qualified in the private sector to do this, number one thing is integrity. So that is my number one top qualification, that I'm a man of integrity and I'll do the job of controller. Because you can do a lot of bad stuff with controller if you're not honest and upright, and I don't care what your qualifications are. But in the private sector, I'm a CEO and CFO. I've started multiple different companies. My first company that I started was American Ground Transportation, moved on to another company called Liberty Launch, which was a military contracting company for transportation for Camp Pendleton, for the Marines over there. I've done Sigma Development LLC, which was development property, CR Automotive Group, which was vehicle sales. I currently sit on the board of directors of a company called EcoSciences. We're a California-based corporation, and we do manufacturing. I'm a former city commissioner in the city of Anaheim, and since I live in Anaheim as well, I'm the treasurer, board of directors of the Anaheim Performing Arts Center Foundation, and we're privately funded. We're not using government money, but it's about a $700 million project to build a performing arts center in Anaheim, an educational center. So I work within the corporate world as a CEO, CFO. I work a lot within 501c3s, charities, and I thought I wasn't busy enough, so I decided to run for California State Controller.
Right here. Dave.
It's so easy, just because your name, the pick, everything.
You figured out my name, right? Okay. I like what both of you are saying on multiple fronts. I've got questions for both of you. First of all, the issues you're talking about, I've been called down to our state capitol for the last almost 20 years on the same issue. The sales tax issue on services keeps coming back, and it keeps coming out of Los Angeles. Every time it keeps brought up from Southern California, he's right on people with what they're trying to do. All services, they want to do sales taxes. Isn't new. They keep coming. My question gets to your initiative on revamping the income tax. With that, are you shifting the burden like some of the other municipalities in the U.S. to where the local municipalities would be responsible for the filing and the collection of the tax to go up, or are we going to keep it centrally located at the FTB to come back down? Because that would be an additional burden on the local municipalities.
What actually I'd want to do is actually have, instead of, what do we have, 5 now or 6? I actually want to bring everything down to one tax board, so no, Board of Equalization or Franchise Tax Board, Board of Control. Keep everything under one, and then at that time I want elected representatives, but primarily I would like to have a check on either controllers or treasurers or people on the county level being, having board and oversight for appeal matters, because right now we took it away basically from the BOE and they get no representation. So that's what I'd like to do, is keep it under one and then have the ability and control oversight happening on the county level as well as elected officials on the state. It would be separate.
And you would be able to pull BOE back in because they've pulled themselves out and they are currently not held accountable, and they do not even have to follow the taxpayer bill of rights or anything at current. All of that disappeared about a year ago.
Yeah.
And basically, as I call it, they went rogue. They're
Yeah.
out on their own. So your tax plan would pull them back into one agency as it's been proposed before.
Yes.
Okay.
It would save a lot of money, but I just don't want it onto the state level, just on oversight. That's why I want to bring in the counties or your county controller, assessor, treasurers, to see exactly what the balance will be, to have those, and those would be the appeal boards, to have multiple oversight onto it, because before there wasn't. And you can have a lot of people being taken advantage of. So I believe in this principle called total depravity. So when you have two sinners and they want to go ahead and clash, it's better than having one sinner having all the power. So if you devolve it, guess what? You're going to have better government that way, because each person's going to be competing and no one's going to want to basically lose their power and authority. So that's why I want decentralized.
Okay, and that leads into the question for you, because this has been a problem over with FTB, EDD, BOE, all those agencies that collect all of our taxes here in California. The bigger problem is no one coordinates with the Secretary of State's office. We go through issue after issue with suspended corporations, defunct corporations. We've got the Raylight issues for unfunded LLCs. And the problem is the Secretary of State's office has basically been non-responsive and useless in getting those resolved. And we're dealing with Franchise Tax Board, and we'll get them pretty well resolved there, but then it's, okay, now you have to go back to Secretary of State's office because there's no sharing of information, but there's a whole lot of enforcement that's causing problems out here in the business world. How are you going to fix that as Secretary of State? I love the voter stuff, I'm for that, but we've got business side that needs to be fixed.
All right. That's the second most important part of the Secretary of State's office is business registration. Right now it takes it takes 3 weeks to register a business in the state of California. It takes 10 minutes in Nevada, a whopping hour in Massachusetts. We need to streamline that whole process. We need to modernize that process. And as we do that, as you said, a lot of people think that, the Franchise Tax Board and the Secretary of State are the same thing. They're not. But, just like I'm talking about with voter registration, how we need to start getting these agencies to talk, the same thing has to happen. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've dealt with that as a business attorney. I've actually had to deal with that issue, and it's just a absolute travesty, the lack of communication between the government agencies. Last question in here, right here.
I want to know how many miles you're riding a day?
Okay.
Are you going uphill and downhill? And who's leading?
Approximately, I've been estimated about 80 miles a day is what I've been doing. I've only got about 55 miles in today, so I'll be getting on the bike and riding up to Orville tonight just because I need a few more miles. But my name's Mark Meuser. I'm ready to be your next Secretary of State, and with Meuser, you are more sure of fair and honest elections.
My name is Konstantinos Roditis. I'm running for California State Controller, and because, again, my name is so complex, you can go to my website. It's really easy, cacontroller.com. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so very much.